April 10, 1943. 24,000 feet above the Bay of Biscay. Cold air knifed through the seams of Lieutenant Mark Ellison's oxygen mask as his P-38 Lightning shuddered under violent bursts of incoming cannon fire. The sky around him flickered with streaks of orange as a pair of Messerschmitt Bf-109G fighters slashed through the formation from above. The engines roared at full power. The airframe vibrated with every evasive pull. His gloves slipped on the control yoke, slick with sweat despite the freezing altitude. The metallic smell of heated ammunition mixed with the sting of oxygen rushing through the mask. There was no time to look for the rest of his escort flight. The German fighters had come down like diving hawks, their attack timed perfectly as the American formation banked to reposition over the convoy below. Ellison's Lightning tilted hard left. Tracers whipped across his canopy. He heard the thump of impacts somewhere on the fuselage. The left engine coughed. A rising vibration started as if the entire power plant were tearing itself apart. He pressed the left rudder. Nothing changed. The vibration grew louder. Flames licked briefly along the nacelle. The engine sputtered and died. The propeller spun into a silver disk of windmilling metal. The cockpit filled with a heavy, low-frequency hum coming from the surviving right engine that now strained against the sudden asymmetrical drag. The aircraft yawed sharply toward the dead side. Ellison gritted his teeth and pushed the throttle on the remaining engine to maximum. The nose dipped. He felt the Lightning stretch under the uneven load, a sensation like the aircraft was trying to roll itself upside down. His heartbeat hammered. Every instinct told him that losing an engine at this altitude meant death. In most fighters this high above enemy territory, losing a power plant meant either bailing out or spiraling uncontrollably into the sea. Below him, the two Bf-109s curved around for another attack. He saw their silhouettes briefly, the tight lines of the German fighters slicing through the thin clouds. The enemy pilots had laughed at the Lightning long before they ever engaged it. Luftwaffe intelligence had mocked its twin booms, its wide profile, its unusual silhouette. They saw it as an awkward machine that would fall apart when pressed. Many believed that if you knocked out one engine, the rest of the battle was finished. Ellison was now the target that would prove them right or wrong. The cockpit trembled violently as the P-38 fought to stay steady. The right engine growled with a deep, rising strain. Yet the aircraft did not drop into an unrecoverable spiral. The wide wings still held lift. The remaining Allison V-1710 engine still gave thrust. The rudder still bit the thin air. Ellison felt the initial panic inside him shift to a thin, sharpened focus. He leveled the wings, slowly, precisely. The twin boom frame responded with surprising obedience. Even with one engine gone, the Lightning remained controllable. Not comfortable, not safe, but controllable. He kept the nose down slightly to maintain airspeed. He checked his instruments. Oil pressure on the surviving engine was good. Airspeed steady. Altitude falling, but under control. The P-38 caught the sunlight as it banked away from the Germans, its polished surfaces flashing like a signal flare in the cold sky. The Bf-109s closed again. Their wings wagged as they moved into firing position. Ellison keyed his radio. Static crackled across the headset. Lightning 2 to Lightning lead. Left engine gone. I am heading west. I can stay airborne. There was relief in hearing his own voice, even though he knew no one might hear it clearly. He rolled slightly to the right, giving the Germans a difficult firing angle. They fired anyway. Bright orange ripples flickered across their wings. He felt one round punch through the tail, but the aircraft held. The right engine surged. He pulled gently, letting the aircraft slide downward into thicker air. The Germans turned away, unwilling to chase a wounded fighter deeper toward Allied lines. The sky grew still again, except for the raw vibration of the single functioning engine carrying the entire weight of the airframe. As the German fighters faded into the distance, Ellison stared at the dead engine housing along the boom. Smoke trailed behind it in a thin ribbon. Yet the Lightning kept flying. Its structure held. The surviving engine pulled the entire aircraft without protest. Pilots in Europe had begun to notice this strange fact. Even crippled, the Lightning did not give up. It could bring a man back from impossible situations. Fighters like the P-51 Mustang and the P-47 Thunderbolt were legends in their own ways. But the Lightning had something few others possessed. It could lose half its power and still carry its pilot home. Ellison exhaled slowly as the altitude needle dropped toward a safer level. The cold sky had stopped shaking. The Lightning was wounded, but alive. Every bump and vibration spoke of the same truth. The enemy had mocked its design, but the aircraft itself refused to die. Ellison turned west toward home, the single engine thundering against the silence of the upper air. Ellison guided the wounded Lightning westward, the landscape below shifting from the cold metallic shimmer of open water to the darker greens of the French coastline far beneath the cloud deck. His breathing steadied as the aircraft held course. The right engine hummed with steady determination, almost as if the machine were built for this moment. Every mile put more distance between him and the swarm of German fighters now circling back to their bases, unaware that their crippled prey was still alive. Long before men like Ellison trusted their lives to the P-38 Lightning, engineers at Lockheed had fought a different battle. In 1937, the United States Army Air Corps issued a demanding requirement: create a high-altitude, high-speed interceptor capable of climbing faster than any fighter in the world. Clarence Kelly Johnson, a rising aerodynamic genius, took the challenge. Instead of a traditional fuselage, he proposed something radical: a central pod for the cockpit and armament, flanked by two long booms that housed the engines, turbo superchargers, and landing gear. It was unlike any fighter America had ever built. Test pilots who first saw the prototype did not know what to make of it. From a distance, the aircraft looked like a predatory insect. Wings stretched across twin metallic spines. On the ground, the long gear stance and wide frame made it seem unnaturally large. But once airborne, the Lightning moved with an elegance no one expected. Early trials revealed blistering speed. It exceeded 400 miles per hour. It climbed aggressively to altitudes where most fighters gasped for air. And because all its firepower sat in the nose, the aircraft had no convergence issues. Its 20mm cannon and 450 caliber machine guns could reach out in a tight, devastating stream. Across the Atlantic, Luftwaffe intelligence officers soon saw photographs of the new American fighter. Reports circulated among German aviation circles. The silhouette looked odd. Many dismissed it. Some pilots joked that it was too big to maneuver and too complicated to maintain. Others believed it would snap apart if forced into a tight turning fight. Even in Japan, where intelligence officers examined early combat reports from the Pacific, the twin-boom fighter was mocked as a bulky machine unsuited for close combat. Those early assumptions followed the Lightning into its first operations over Europe in 1942. The 1st Fighter Group and 14th Fighter Group arrived with shiny new P-38s, their surfaces reflecting the cold winter light over England. Pilots struggled with unfamiliar systems. Turbo supercharger controls were delicate. Cockpit temperatures fluctuated wildly at altitude. Frostbite and oxygen system issues were common. When they engaged German fighters for the first time, they learned quickly that the Bf-109s and FW-190s fought aggressively at low to medium altitude, where the Lightning was not at its best. Losses came early, and German pilots doubled down on their mockery. They saw P-38s limping home on one engine and assumed the aircraft was failing. They did not yet understand that many of those damaged fighters actually returned to base, while others would have crashed outright. For American pilots, every engagement became a lesson carved into metal. Every sortie taught them how to wring the most out of the aircraft's strengths and minimize its weaknesses. By early 1943, the fighter groups adapted their tactics. They began operating at higher altitudes, where the P-38's turbo-supercharged engines breathed freely, and its long wings provided smooth stability. In these upper layers of thin air, the Lightning moved like a different creature. Pilots used boom and zoom tactics, diving on German fighters with crushing speed, then climbing back into the bright, cold light far above. Its long range allowed it to escort bombers on missions unreachable to other fighters. German pilots who once mocked its size began facing it in conditions that favored the American machine. Inside the cockpit, the visibility was excellent. Pilots could track enemy fighters diving from above. They could fire concentrated bursts without worrying about the crossing patterns of wing-mounted guns. When a Lightning pilot squeezed the trigger, the nose spewed a tight stream of fire that tore through anything it touched. American units soon learned how to harness this advantage. On escort missions, pairs of P-38s positioned themselves slightly above bomber formations, ready to dive at any German fighter attempting to break through. The Lightning's stability at high altitude made it an ideal guardian for the lumbering bombers. As the aircraft matured, so did the confidence of those who flew it. In the Pacific, where long distances stretched across vast blue water, the P-38 found even greater purpose. Pilots needed fighters with legs long enough to protect bombers and intercept enemy formations far from friendly airfields. The Lightning excelled here. Its twin engines provided security over empty ocean, where losing a power plant in a single-engine fighter meant virtually certain death. In this theater, the aircraft's unusual frame was an asset rather than a burden. These experiences reshaped its reputation. No longer was it the odd machine mocked by enemy pilots. It was becoming the aircraft crews trusted with their lives on missions hours away from land. The twin boom silhouette that once inspired ridicule was now a symbol of reach, power, and survival. And soon the Lightning would face one of the most ambitious missions of the entire war, one that required every ounce of its speed, range, and dependability. And soon the Lightning would face one of the most ambitious missions of the entire war, one that required every ounce of its speed, range, and dependability. The assignment came on April 18, 1943. At Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, the humid air clung to everything. Sweat soaked through flight suits before dawn. Mechanics worked by lantern light as they armed rows of P-38 Lightnings for a mission unlike any attempted before. Word passed quietly among the pilots of the 339th Fighter Squadron. Intelligence officers had decrypted a Japanese communication containing the upcoming movements of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Imperial Japanese Navy. He would be flying from Rabaul to Balali Island that morning. The man who orchestrated the attack on Pearl Harbor was finally within reach. Major John Mitchell, leading the operation, gathered his pilots near a makeshift map table. A red line traced the distance from Guadalcanal to the intercept point. It was more than 400 miles each way. No other American fighter in the Pacific had the range to make the trip. Only the P-38 Lightning, with specially fitted drop tanks and its efficient high-altitude engines, could cover the distance. Mitchell spoke quietly but firmly as he outlined the plan. They would take off before dawn, fly at extremely low altitude to avoid radar detection, then climb near Bougainville to meet Yamamoto's aircraft at precisely the right moment. There was no room for error. If they were early, they risked discovery. If they were late, the Admiral would be gone. Captain Thomas Lanphier Jr. and Lieutenant Rex Barber were chosen to lead the attack element. Their job was to dive on the Admiral's Mitsubishi G4M bomber and destroy it before the escorting Zero fighters could react. Other P-38s would handle the escorts, while the attack pair focused on the primary target. The stakes were enormous. The entire Pacific War effort felt the weight of this mission. As dawn approached, the pilots moved to their aircraft. The ground trembled as dozens of engines roared to life in the warm, pre-dawn darkness. Propellers kicked up dust and fronds of grass. Lanterns flickered around the maintenance crews, who gave final thumbs up. Mitchell's voice came over the radio. All Lightnings, taxi to runway. Begin takeoff roll in sequence. The line of twin boom fighters accelerated one after another, lifting into the dim gray sky. Once airborne, they dropped to wave top level. The ocean surface passed beneath them in a blur. At such low altitude, the roar of engines mixed with the heavy pressure of damp Pacific air. Pilots stared ahead, eyes fixed on Mitchell's aircraft, maintaining perfect spacing without climbing high enough for Japanese radar to detect them. Hour after hour, the formation skimmed along the water. Salt spray streaked across canopies. Each pilot felt the tension of knowing a single mechanical failure at this distance could mean ditching in shark-infested waters. The Lightning's twin engines offered reassurance. Even over the endless blue horizon, the pilots knew that if one engine failed, the aircraft could still limp back toward Guadalcanal. Near Bougainville, Mitchell gave the order to climb. The P-38s rose in a shallow ascent into clearer air. The tropical haze gave way to sharp sunlight. As they reached interception altitude, Mitchell took a long look at the distant coastline. The timing had to be exact. He keyed the radio. Climb 2000. Redirect heading 040. Prepare for contact. Moments later, glints of sunlight revealed aircraft shapes in the distance. 2 G4M bombers escorted by 6 Zero fighters. Yamamoto's party was arriving exactly as the decoded message predicted. Mitchell directed Lanphier and Barber forward. The 2 P-38s accelerated, engines howling. They angled slightly away from the main formation, then arced upward to gain the advantage of altitude. Japanese escorts spotted them and broke formation, their Zeros climbing rapidly. To intercept. The air filled with converging streaks of fighters. Lanphier banked sharply toward the bombers, slicing through a gap between 2 diving Zeros. He felt the pull of G-forces tighten around him as he swung the nose of his P-38 toward the lead G4M. Barber stayed below him, matching speed. The 2 Lightnings closed on the bombers just as the Japanese formation began to scatter. The first G4M filled Lanphier's gun sight. He steadied his breathing. The twin boom frame held firm under the strain. He squeezed the trigger. Tracer rounds sped forward in a bright, tight stream from the nose of the Lightning. They tore into the bomber's right wing. Flames erupted instantly. The G4M rolled, trailing smoke, and plunged toward the jungle canopy of Bougainville. Barber targeted the second bomber. The pilot inside the Japanese aircraft attempted evasive maneuvers, but the Lightning was already in firing position. Barber fired a long, controlled burst. Bullets ripped through the fuselage and engine mounts. The bomber shuddered violently, then broke apart mid-air. Debris spiraled down. Zero fighters swarmed in from every angle. Mitchell's covering flight dove on them, guns roaring. The sky twisted into a chaotic ballet of sharp turns, steep dives, and tight climbs. Barber and Lanphier fought free of the melee, their engines straining as they accelerated away from the burning wreckage below. The Admiral's plane had fallen. The most important interception mission in the Pacific War was complete, but they were hundreds of miles from home, with enemy fighters still searching for them and the long return flight ahead. The P-38s regrouped into loose formation and began the long trek south. Engines hummed steadily, drop tanks drained. The pilots kept low once again, trusting the twin engines to carry them across the vast expanse of ocean. For hours they flew in silence, each man aware of the weight of what they had accomplished. The Lightning's range had made the mission possible. Its speed allowed it to strike before the enemy could react. Its stability allowed precise firing at high speed. And its reliability meant every pilot trusted that at least one engine would bring them home if disaster struck. As Guadalcanal neared, the tension broke. The coastline came into view. The pilots eased their aircraft toward Henderson Field, wheels dropping as the runway stretched out ahead. One by one, the Lightnings touched down, their engines rumbling across the strip with a sense of finality. The mission had changed the course of the Pacific War. But for the pilots who flew it, the true hero was the aircraft beneath them. The machine that enemy pilots had once mocked had just delivered one of the most decisive blows of the war.